All right, let's go. Number 10. Operation Northwoods. In March 1962, the Joint Chiefs of Staff of the United States military submitted a memorandum to Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara. The document proposed a series of covert operations designed to create a pretext for military intervention in Cuba. The operations included staging terrorist attacks on American soil, bombing American cities, sinking boats carrying Cuban refugees, shooting down a civilian aircraft over international waters, and developing a program of sniper attacks and bombings in Miami and Washington that would be attributed to Cuban agents. The memorandum was signed by every member of the Joint Chiefs. It traveled through official channels. It received the correct institutional approvals at every level below the Secretary of Defense. McNamara did not approve it. President Kennedy rejected it and dismissed General Lyman Lemnitzer, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, who had submitted it. The document was classified. It remained classified for 35 years. When the National Security Archive released it in 1997 through the Assassination Records Review Board declassification process, the proposal ran to 15 pages. It named specific methods, specific locations, specific cover stories. It described how civilian casualties would be maximized to generate public outrage sufficient to justify invasion. But here is where Northwoods is not a historical outlier. It was not proposed by rogue actors. It was the product of the highest uniformed military authority in the United States, produced through normal institutional channels, and signed by every officer authorized to sign it. The system that was designed to prevent this kind of proposal produced it instead. One person said no. The document is public. The 15 pages are readable. The signatures are on them. Number 9. Operation Sea Spray. Between September 1950 and October 1951, the United States Navy conducted a series of biological warfare tests on the civilian population of the San Francisco Bay Area. The operation, designated Operation Sea Spray, involved spraying the city and surrounding communities with Serratia marchescens, a bacterium believed at the time to be harmless, chosen because its red pigment made it identifiable in laboratory analysis, and because its size and aerosol behavior approximated the characteristics of genuine biological warfare agents. The Navy positioned spray equipment on a vessel and sailed it back and forth across the bay, releasing aerosol clouds that drifted across San Francisco, Berkeley, Oakland, and surrounding communities. The stated purpose was to assess how a biological warfare agent would disperse across a coastal urban population in an actual attack scenario. None of the approximately 800,000 people living in the affected area were informed. None consented. The operation was classified. Within days of the spraying, 11 patients arrived at Stanford University Hospital with unusual Serratia marcescens infections. 1. A cardiac surgery patient named Edward Nevin died. The remaining 10 recovered. Hospital physicians found the cluster of Serratia infections unusual and documented it. They did not know the source. The Navy's own internal assessment, declassified decades later, acknowledged that the bacterial dispersal had performed as expected across the population. But here is where sea spray was not a single event. The Army and Navy conducted more than 200 open-air biological and chemical tests on American cities and military personnel between 1949 and 1969. Minneapolis, St. Louis, New York City subway system. The populations were not informed. The tests were classified. The assessments of health outcomes were not made available to affected communities or their physicians. Edward Nevin's grandson filed suit in 1981 when the program was first disclosed publicly. The federal court ruled the government was immune from liability. The test program had been legal because it had been classified. Number 8. The Green Run. On December 2nd and 3, 1949, the United States Atomic Energy Commission and the Air Force conducted a deliberate release of radioactive material over the state of Washington. The operation, designated the Green Run, involved intentionally discharging approximately 7,780 curies of iodine-131 and 20,000 curies of xenon-133 from the Hanford Site nuclear facility into the atmosphere. The stated purpose was to test American aerial monitoring equipment to determine whether the aircraft and instruments being developed to detect Soviet nuclear tests could identify radioactive releases at the concentrations produced by the Soviet program. Testing the equipment required generating an actual radioactive plume of known composition. The population of eastern Washington and Oregon provided the test environment. The release was conducted at night. The wind conditions were tracked to maximize the plume's geographic spread. The monitoring aircraft followed the cloud as it moved east, southeast, and south across the region. The population in the plume path, communities in Walla Walla, Kennewick, Pasco, Yakima, and surrounding areas, was not informed. No public health monitoring was conducted. The operation was classified for decades. Internal Atomic Energy Commission documents, released through Freedom of Information Act litigation in the 1980s, showed that agency scientists had raised concerns before the operation about the iodine-131 dose that would be received by downwind populations, particularly children and individuals with elevated thyroid activity. The operation proceeded. But here is where the Green Run exists within a larger documented pattern. The Hanford site had been conducting radioactive releases, both deliberate and accidental, across the surrounding region since 1944. The deliberate releases were classified. The populations in affected areas were not informed of the exposure assessments that agency scientists were producing internally. The Green Run was not the exception. It was the documented instance. Number 7. The Atomic Veterans. Between 1951 and 1963, the United States military deliberately positioned American soldiers in proximity to nuclear weapons tests at the Nevada test site and at Pacific Proving Grounds to observe their physical and psychological responses to nuclear detonations. Approximately 400,000 military personnel participated in nuclear test exercises during this period. Several hundred were positioned within a few kilometers of detonations. The soldiers were told the exercises were training operations designed to prepare them for combat in a nuclear battlefield environment. They were not told the full extent of the radiation doses they would receive. They were not provided dosimetry equipment capable of recording all relevant exposure types. They were ordered, in some cases, to walk through areas contaminated by recent detonations. Operation Plum Bob, conducted in Nevada in 1957, involved 18,000 military personnel and 29 nuclear detonations over a 5-month period. Soldiers were positioned in trenches approximately 2 miles from ground zero for some shots. After detonation, they were ordered to advance toward the blast site as part of simulated assault exercises. The Department of Defense's own study, conducted in the 1980s, estimated that soldiers at Plum Bob received radiation doses significantly above what would be considered acceptable occupational exposure under civilian standards. But here is where the Atomic Veterans Program's most consequential element was not the exposure itself. It was what happened afterward. Veterans who developed cancers and other radiogenic conditions consistent with radiation exposure were denied disability claims for decades on the grounds that their service records did not adequately document their participation in nuclear tests. The dosimetry records were incomplete. In some cases, the dosimetry had not been accurate to begin with. Veterans died while their claims were pending. Congress passed the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act in 1990. It covered some conditions for some participants. It did not cover all conditions, and it did not cover all who were exposed. The government acknowledged what had been done. The acknowledgement came after most of the people it had been done to were dead. Number 6. COINTELPRO, the night Fred Hampton died. On December 4th, 1969, at approximately 4:45 in the morning, Chicago police officers conducted a raid on a West Side apartment used by Illinois Black Panther Party chairman Fred Hampton. The raid was presented publicly as a response to intelligence about illegal weapons. Hampton, 21 years old, was shot twice in the head at close range while lying in bed. He died at the scene. Panther member Mark Clark was also killed. 4 other occupants were wounded. The FBI's role in the raid was not public knowledge at the time. Documents obtained through subsequent litigation revealed that the FBI's Chicago field office had provided law enforcement with a floor plan of the apartment, including the specific location of Hampton's bedroom. The floor plan had been obtained through William O'Neill, an FBI informant who had infiltrated the Chicago Black Panther Party and was serving as Hampton's personal bodyguard. O'Neill had also, according to documented evidence, provided Hampton with a substance in his food the night before the raid that was later identified as a barbiturate. The Hampton family filed a civil lawsuit. After more than a decade of litigation, a federal jury found that the city of Chicago, Cook County, and the federal government had conspired in Hampton's death. The settlement, reached in 1982, was approximately $1.85 million. But here is where Hampton's death is not an operational anomaly within COINTELPRO. The FBI's internal documents, declassified through the Church Committee, showed that the program's directors had explicitly discussed the use of violence as a tool for disrupting domestic organizations. The phrase neutralize appeared consistently in COINTELPRO internal communications. Hampton was a specific target. His floor plan was in the FBI's files before the raid. The raid was conducted by police. The plan was in FBI files. The informant was on the FBI payroll. Number 5. The Huston Plan. In June 1970, President Richard Nixon approved a domestic intelligence plan submitted by White House aide Tom Charles Huston. The plan, known as the Huston Plan, authorized the CIA, FBI, NSA, and Defense Intelligence Agency to conduct a coordinated program of domestic intelligence operations that included covert mail opening, warrantless electronic surveillance, surreptitious entry into private residences and offices, and the infiltration of domestic political organizations with informants authorized to engage in provocation. Huston's own memorandum, submitted to Nixon with the plan, explicitly acknowledged that several of the proposed activities were illegal under existing law. The memorandum described them as illegal and recommended them anyway on the grounds that the intelligence value exceeded the legal risk. Nixon approved the plan on July 14, 1970. FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover, who opposed the plan not on legal grounds, but because it would have required the FBI to share operations with other agencies, threatened to expose it. Nixon rescinded formal approval 5 days later. The plan was never formally implemented as a coordinated program. Several of its individual components were implemented anyway, by individual agencies operating through existing programs that predated the Huston Plan and continued after its rescission. But here is where the Huston Plan's significance is not the document itself. It is the approval. The President of the United States reviewed a memorandum that explicitly described proposed operations as illegal and approved them. The approval lasted 5 days before political pressure forced its rescission. The question the document raises is not whether the plan was eventually rescinded. It is what the approval itself reveals about the institutional willingness to use illegal means against American citizens exercising constitutional rights. The approval is in the document. The document is in the record. Number 4. Project MINARET. Between 1967 and 1973, the National Security Agency maintained a classified watch list of American citizens whose international communications were to be intercepted and disseminated to domestic law enforcement and intelligence agencies. The program was designated Project MINARET. Its existence was unknown outside a small number of cleared personnel. The watch list included civil rights leaders, anti-war activists, journalists, and members of Congress. Among the names on the list were Martin Luther King Jr., Muhammad Ali, Jane Fonda, Benjamin Spock, and senators and congressmen who had publicly opposed the Vietnam War. Their international telegrams, telephone calls, and communications were collected by NSA technical systems, and the resulting intelligence was distributed to the FBI, CIA, Secret Service, and Defense Intelligence Agency. The NSA's own internal review of the program, conducted in 1975 and partially declassified years later, concluded that MINARET had operated outside the agency's legal authority, and that the watch list targeting criteria had been applied without adequate oversight or legal review. But here is where MINARET's operational scope reveals the specific nature of what was being collected. The watch list was not targeting foreign agents or foreign-connected individuals on the basis of documented foreign intelligence connections. It was targeting American citizens on the basis of their domestic political positions and associations. The senators whose communications were intercepted had not been assessed as foreign intelligence threats. They were on the list because they opposed the war. The legal framework that was supposed to prevent domestic intelligence collection against American citizens was not applied. The watch list existed. The communications were collected. The intelligence was distributed to agencies that used it in domestic political investigations. The list with the names is in the Church Committee's report. The names are readable. Number 3, Operation Chaos. In August 1967, CIA Director Richard Helms authorized a domestic intelligence program in response to a White House request to determine whether the American anti-war movement was receiving direction or funding from foreign powers. The program was designated Chaos. Its purpose was to identify foreign connections to domestic dissent. Over the following 7 years, Chaos compiled files on more than 300,000 American citizens and organizations. The program infiltrated domestic political organizations with CIA assets. It collected and retained information on individuals with no foreign connections and no foreign intelligence relevance, students, professors, journalists, activists, solely on the basis of their domestic political activities. It shared intelligence with the FBI and maintained a computerized index of American citizens designated Hydra. The CIA's own Inspector General, reviewing Chaos in 1969, concluded that the program had exceeded the agency's legal mandate, which explicitly prohibits domestic intelligence operations. Helms continued the program. The Church Committee's 1975 investigation found that Chaos had collected information on individuals who were entirely domestic in their activities and associations, and that the program's files had been used to assist FBI investigations of domestic political organizations that had no foreign intelligence dimension. But here is where Chaos reveals the structural problem the program created. When an intelligence agency builds a file on a citizen, the file creates an institutional record that outlasts the program. Chaos files were retained in CIA databases after the program was terminated. The 300,000 individuals whose domestic political activities had been recorded without legal authority had no mechanism to know the files existed, no mechanism to challenge their content, and no mechanism to have them removed. The files were built on Americans exercising constitutional rights. The files existed. Some remain in classified archives. Number 2, Project SHAMROCK. From 1945 until 1975, the National Security Agency and its predecessor organization collected copies of every international telegram transmitted to, from, or through the United States. The program was designated Project SHAMROCK. It operated through agreements with three major American telegraph companies, RCA Global, ITT World Communications, and Western Union International, whose cooperation was obtained through appeals to patriotism and assurances that the arrangement would remain secret. The volume of material collected was staggering. At its peak, Shamrock was processing approximately 150,000 messages per month. The collection covered the international communications of American citizens, American businesses, American journalists, foreign governments, and foreign nationals. Every international telegram that passed through American telecommunications infrastructure for 30 years. The program had no legal authorization. No statute authorized it. No court had approved it. No congressional committee had been informed of it. It operated on the informal agreement between intelligence officials and corporate executives that had been established in the immediate aftermath of World War II and had simply continued year after year, administration after administration, without formal review. Senator Frank Church, chairing the committee that investigated Shamrock in 1975, described it as probably the largest government interception program affecting Americans ever undertaken. But here is where Shamrock's 30-year operational history produces its most specific institutional implication. The program existed across multiple presidential administrations, multiple intelligence directors, and multiple generations of personnel. It was not a decision made once and forgotten. It was renewed continuously through the active cooperation of the intelligence community and three major American corporations. Thousands of people knew about it across 3 decades. The program was terminated in May 1975, the day before the Church Committee was scheduled to question the NSA director about it in a closed hearing. The termination and the hearing date were not coincidental. Number 1. The files the government kept on itself. In 1975, the Church Committee completed its investigation into the intelligence activities of the CIA, FBI, NSA, and associated agencies. The committee's final report ran to 14 volumes. It documented COINTELPRO, Chaos, Minaret, Shamrock, the assassination plots, the mail opening programs, and the surveillance of American citizens across 4 decades. Senator Church, in his public statements during the investigation, described what the committee had found as something that required a specific word. He used the word abuses. The programs documented in the report were, by his description, not the product of rogue individuals acting outside the system. They were authorized programs, approved at senior levels, running across multiple administrations, against American citizens exercising constitutional rights. The committee asked a specific question of every program it examined. Who authorized this? Who knew about it? And who was accountable for it? In most cases, the authorization chain was clear. The programs had been approved. Senior officials had known. In almost no case was anyone held legally accountable. The intelligence directors who had approved illegal surveillance retired. The FBI agents who had run COINTELPRO retired. The military officers who had signed Northwoods retired. The corporate executives who had participated in Shamrock were not prosecuted. But here is where the Church Committee's findings produced their most direct implication for the programs that came after. The committee's investigation identified the programs. Its report recommended oversight mechanisms, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, the Congressional Intelligence Committees, specifically designed to prevent the authorized illegal programs from continuing. Those mechanisms were established. The programs that have been disclosed since 1975, PRISM, Minaret's digital successors, the domestic surveillance architecture revealed in 2013, were conducted under the oversight frameworks the Church Committee established to prevent them. The oversight framework existed. The programs existed inside it. The files the government kept on itself are public. The 14 volumes are readable. What they document is a government that built programs to surveil, disrupt, and in documented cases, physically harm its own citizens, was investigated, acknowledged what it had done, and constructed oversight mechanisms that the subsequent generation of programs operated through rather than around. If you want to see more videos like this, click the video on screen now and make sure to subscribe.